Good morning, everybody. We're starting 1 minute late, but I think it's important to have more students in the room. So I'm Emmanuel Brunet-Jailly. I'm the one who's directing the Border Institute and the Big Borders and Globalization Laboratory here at the University of Victoria. And I would like to acknowledge and respect the local speaking people on whose territory the University of Victoria stands. Songhees and Wasanic people whose relationship with the land continues to this day, and say that I have lived in this part of the country for now 24 years. It's incredible how time goes by. And that as a settler and a new migrant, and I really love where I live, and I feel very privileged to live here. And with that, we're going to go around the room. I'm going to start with the online presentation for Tatiana. For Joanna, and I'm going to start with Tatiana Shaban because Joanna knows Tatiana and they've worked together in the past. And then we'll go to Tatiana, and then Katerina, and then Faith, and so on and so forth. So Tatiana, take the floor and introduce yourself very briefly, please. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Tatiana, and I completed my PhD at University of Victoria with a special focus on European regional governance, European neighborhood policy, and borders. And I continue to work as a big lab researcher on the similar topics in borders in this neighborhood. And I just briefly use this opportunity to thank Joanna to give me an opportunity to teach at her WSB Academy, the big course, Borders and Globalization course, which Emmanuel developed. And that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we go to Tatiana Sia of Hundu. Please take the floor, Tatiana.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings. Thank you. My name is Tatiana Siavundu. I'm a talent and organizational development officer for Zimbabwe Revenue Authority. I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm also into research. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now we go to Faith Mathenge. Please, Faith, introduce yourself briefly, please.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Faith Mathenge. My background is customs. I'm a customs practitioner, and currently I'm based at the WCO Regional Office for Capacity Building. So I've been also in capacity building for about 8 years, and I am glad to be in this session to learn more about border management. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we go to Mora. We go to Mora Obogi. Please, Mora, take the floor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mora Obogi. I am a customs officer working with Kenya Revenue Authority in Kenya. And I have been a customs officer since 2008. Yeah. Thank you for this. Yes.
Now we go in the room. Let's start with Edison.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Edison Provini. I'm from Brazil. I'm a customs agent in Brazil, working as a deputy coordinator, customs coordinator in Brazil, and also coordinator of the technical committee number 2 in Mercosur, that is in charge of customs issues and trade facilitation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We go to David.
Hello, good morning. I'm David Monti. I am the head of a digital agency studio here in Vancouver. We do knowledge databases, websites, web applications, portals, and we work with many groups such as those here in UVic and other international organizations. And I'm here to expand my digital knowledge into more of the practical side of trade and customs.
Thank you.
And we go to Abani Nisanka, sorry, Abani.
Okay, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Abani Nisanka. I'm from Sri Lanka. I work as a customs officer in my country. And I'm here to do the complete microcredit course. So this is my first institute that I'm attending. And I'm looking forward to getting the benefit from this course. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we go to Leah Lancaster.
Hi, yeah, I'm Leah, and I'm just helping Emmanuel a little bit with the tech, and I'm from the Center for Global Studies, working there a little bit as an administrative assistant. So I get to be here and listen to lots of cool people talk like you.
That's right.
Thank you.
And we have another person who joined online. Lorraine, if you want to introduce yourself, please do it now, briefly, please. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies, having some Wi-Fi issues there. My name is Lorraine Laytech. I work for Canada Border Services Agency, so Customs and Immigration with the federal government here in Victoria, BC, Canada. My area of responsibility is Vancouver Island, which is largely a marine port, being on an island. But yeah, looking forward to hearing from you today and from everyone else in the room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and so as I said yesterday, what we are doing today is we're having Joanna Kurowska-Pysz, who is a professor of economics in Poland. And one of the characteristics of her work and her research is that she has worked on the ground and managed cross-border partnerships in Poland for many, many years. And at the same time, now she's also an academic teaching and doing research on the topic, which is very rare, but also extremely interesting because it means that Joanna can present to us the academic part, but also the very practical part on how things work in one of those, as we discovered yesterday, 300 plus border regions or regios or cross-border partnerships. And so, so I'm really delighted to be able to have Joanna in the Institute. And with that, Joanna, thank you so much for being with us today. And take us away. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. First of all, good morning, everyone. I hope that you can see me, you can hear me, you can see my presentation. And first of all, thank you, Emmanuel, for invitation for Summer Institute. Last year, you remember, I was one of participants. I was in the group. This year, I have the pleasure to present my research and my practical experience related to cross-border functional areas co-creation, development, managing, and evaluating, which is quite a narrow topic. Therefore, when I see that most of you deal with custom, but I hope it will be an interesting issue for you. However, this is a cross-border cooperation mechanism designed for the European borderlands, and I will also present my experiences, my research from European borderlands. However, because I'm one of probably few representatives of Central Eastern Europe, only a few in this course, together with Tatiana. Let me focus on my part of Europe, let's say Central Eastern Europe, and I will present you cases from that area which are slightly different than cases which my colleagues presented you probably yesterday and during this course, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, because, you know, there are many differences in cross-border collaboration models in Western and Eastern Europe. And I hope that presenting these differences today will be also interesting for you. As Emmanuel said, I'm a fellow at WSB University. I'm associate professor. I'm a deputy chair of doctoral school and the head of Department of Management. At the same time, I manage the Research Institute on Territorial and Interorganizational Cooperation. And WSB is a private university, one of the largest in Poland. And according to the criteria of internationalization, we are top ranked in Poland. And it's a pleasure for me to collaborate with Tatiana Szaban, who is one of our professors, and she also develops courses on cross-border cooperation. But today I would like to present you also my practitioner experience, because I combine academic activities with professional careers in consultancy, mainly in evaluation of Interreg programs, managing Interreg projects, cross-border projects, and cooperating with the European Commission, DG Regio, as MEI expert. I'm expert on evaluation, territorial collaboration, and Interreg programs. And today, I will start with a brief explanation what is, in my opinion, with my understanding, European Union regional policy and cohesion policy. But then I will try to present you briefly the main issues related to the boosting of cross-border integration and cross-border cooperation in the Central European borderlands. And in the second part of my lecture, let me briefly present you a key aspects of designing, creation, and developing of cross-border functional area. And I will base of the research and studies of Dr. Andrzej Jakubowski. And probably Emmanuel and some of you, you know Andrzej, because Andrzej was a fellow on the institute last year or 2 years ago, as far as I remember. And he developed the methodology of designing cross-border functional area, which I would like to present you today. And Andrzej is aware of this, and he's glad that I can share with you his methodology and my experience in designing cross-border functional area. And in the third part of my lecture, I will present you a case study of touristic cross-border functional area developed by me. I was commissioned by the European Commission to do this. So this functional area was designed and implemented on the Polish-Lithuanian borderland on so-called Suwałki Belt, which is strategic area connecting European Union countries and Baltic countries. This is a very narrow belt between Kaliningrad region and Belarusian border. And I was invited by European Commission to implement this functional area there. And in the third part of my lecture, let me present you briefly the case study based on this functional area. And in the practicum, I will ask you to discuss some issues related to cross-border functional area governance mechanisms based on Euro-regional cooperation and cooperation within European Group of Territorial Cooperation called TRITIA, located on the Polish-Czech borderland. But it will be after 2 breaks. So now, please, let's focus on the first part of the lecture. And I will start with brief reminding what is European Union regional policy and cohesion policy, because of course I think that some of you have impression what is European Union regional policy, that it is strongly related with competitiveness of European Union, particularly when we compete with Japan, with the US, with other countries. We are going to increase competitiveness of our economy, sustainable development, quality of life, and other issues. But of course, this is not the main issue of this lecture. The most important issue is that we should focus on cohesion policy. Cohesion policy, which covers 2 main issues: strengthening European Union social and economic cohesion by reducing disparities in the level of development between European Union regions, especially peripheral areas, backward regions then require structural economic changes, but also to mitigate the impact of many barriers which still exist on European borderlands and in some region, and then they harm growth, socioeconomic growth and development in some ways. Therefore, these 2 main policies we can call as a base to develop some territorial cooperation processes in Europe. And when discussing how to implement European cohesion policy on European borderlands, we face more challenges I mean borderlands, when we discuss it on borderlands, we face far more challenges than in the other European regions. Because look, when we discuss about implementing such policy, we have to take into account, we have to consider that we discuss about neighboring regions belonging to different countries and functioning according to slightly different conditions. Of course, we want to provide a socioeconomic cohesion, but also cohesion in law, in the rules of existing of entities, public institutions, social bodies, etc. But, you know, on the other hand, we are aware that some differences will exist. So referring to questions presented in this slide, I can say that two last questions address significantly the issues related to European territorial cooperation in borderland. Because first, when we consider how can we better connect territories, particularly border regions, we often face many physical borders like mountains, rivers, other borders, but also very poor public transportations. And they are like natural obstacles to connect our border territories better. And another issue is how to develop cross-border cooperation to mitigate the impact of many barriers which are visible in borderlands and strengthen cross-border ties. And this is another issue, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe. Why? Because maybe some of you are aware that we left for many years under the Iron Curtain, and it was really hard for us to establish some international relations. Now, local actors, regional actors existing on borderlands in Central Eastern Europe, they also use, I would say, magic tool, which is Interreg program, which is available on all European borderlands. And I would say that this is the main tool to mitigate barriers in cross-border cooperation and to increase the level of cohesion among European regions, particularly borderlands. And probably my colleagues told you during previous lectures what is Interreg program, what a fantastic tool it is to connect people on borderlands. You should be aware that almost 40% of European Union population, there are people who live in border areas. We have about 40 internal borders, and on all these borders, Interreg programs are available. They are, I would say, challenging funds. As evaluator of Interreg program, I can say that they are really challenging funds. They require specific knowledge and competences to prepare, manage, and settle and evaluate such project. I mean, cross-border project co-funded by the Interreg. But on the other hand, I can say that particularly for actors from Central and Eastern Europe, this is the main incentive. In many cases, this is the main incentive to start cross-border cooperation and start discussion how to mitigate different barriers in our relation and how to strengthen relation among us, which is crucial when we want to consider establishment of cross-border functional area in the future. So when we consider cross-border cooperation, probably all of you are aware that this is cooperation between public bodies, social bodies, different partners located in the neighboring regions from at least 2 different member states of European Union, lying directly on the borders and adjustment to them. This is very obvious definition. However, when we consider European cross-border cooperation, we have to be aware many different problems, challenges which characterize this specific area, particularly cross-border cooperation. And considering the problems visible in the slide, in my opinion, the crucial problems, this is, first of all, dominant peripheral character of these borderlands. Second issue is there are demographic problems, as everywhere, I guess. low population density, migrations, a lack of well-graduated people, but also, which is crucial for borderlands, lack of cross-border strategies and tools to manage the borderlands development. Believe me, I was initiator of many cross-border projects. My purpose was to attract people who would like to develop cross-border cooperation and prepare for them applications form to Interreg programs. And of course, when I discussed with them the topics of their projects, their aims, their expectations, their needs, it was easy to say to them that what they expect. But when I asked them, do you follow any strategy? Do you have any plan, any comprehensive plan? How do you want to develop your cross-border linkages with partners from the other side of the border? There was no plan, there was no strategy. It was just, I would say, intuitional activity. There were intuitional activities to gain European Union funds together with the colleagues from the other side of the border, to provide some investments, to provide some, let's say, soft projects, people-to-people projects, to develop some relations. But there were sometimes very spontaneous activities, and there are, in many regions, many border regions, there are no serious tools and strategies how cross-border cooperation should be developed. And when we consider such mechanism as cross-border functional area is, I can tell you that this is the crucial issue to develop a strategy for such a territory. This is like a baseline, must have. Therefore, for such territory, it's easier to provide the development, socioeconomic development and development of cross-border linkages, because those territories can follow the strategy or the plan which local actors prepared together. And this is, I would say, competitive advantage of cross-border functional area on comparison with some Euro regions or just European groups of territorial collaboration, when no tangible strategy has been prepared. So, considering many differences in cross-border cooperation in Western and Central and Eastern Europe, when we discuss intensity of cross-border cooperation and intensity of existence of cross-border cooperation barrier, you should be aware that this is far more challenging for us, people from Central and Eastern Europe, to establish cross-border relation, to build Euro regions, to establish European groups of territorial cooperation, and to design cross-border functional areas, because for many years after the Second War, we stayed under Iron Curtain, as I said, and everything was under control of Soviet Union, Soviet Communist Party, and even the countries under the Soviet bloc, their relations were controlled by Soviet Union, because there were some fears from the Soviet side, yes, that, you know, strengthening relations between this neighboring country as Poland, Czechoslovakia, for example, could be a risk for Soviet Union. So can you believe that I lived very close to the border checkpoint, and I didn't know colleagues who lived on the other side of the border? Because, you know, to cross the border, you needed a permission. You need to go to the police station and ask for the passport. You couldn't have passport at home. So it was really hard to establish even inter-organizational relations, cross-border relations between, for example, neighboring towns like Cieszyn and Czech Cieszyn, Görlitz and Zgorzelec, I mean German and Polish town or Polish and Czech town. It was really hard. And when we consider people-to-people relation, it was even more challenging. So we started from the scratch. When we joined European Union in 2004, Poland, Czechia, Slovakia, Hungary, Baltic countries, and others, yes, it was something amazing for us, yes, that we could start cross-border relations using Interreg funds. But on the other hand, we were aware there, and we are still aware, that many bureaucratic barriers exist in our relations, and still we have some mental problems, I don't know how to say it. In our perception, international collaboration is something very critical, and many people, many organizations and institutions in Central and Eastern Europe still do not have sufficient competences to develop such relations. So we have to educate people, we have to educate institutions how to develop cross-border flows, how to develop cross-border linkages and relations on the people level, on the institutional level, on the regional level. This is a big challenge for us. And considering the barriers which are mentioned, I can tell you that implementation of Interreg programs on the Central and Eastern European borderlands, they benefited in many good results for directly for partners who participated in this project, but also for regions, neighboring border regions, which participated, which are covered by Interreg programs. And for example, you can see in this slide some examples of Interreg programs on Central and Eastern European borderlands, like for example, Interreg Czech Republic, Poland, Interreg Poland, Slovakia, Czechia, Romania, Hungary, etc., etc. And you can see what topics can be supported, what topics of collaboration can be supported by these programs on these borderlands. And of course, these topics are negotiated by cooperating parties with DG Regio, with European Commissions. So they are different on different borders. But in many Interreg programs, still some topics exist which are devoted for mitigating barriers in cross-border cooperation. And this is really crucial when we want to develop in the future cross-border functional area, which I will present you in the second part of the lecture. So considering the using Interreg programs for development of cross-border cooperation in Central and Eastern Europe, I can tell you that considering the lack of funds for investments, these money are mainly used for hard investments, for some infrastructure investments, but also for people-to-people initiatives and for reducing different barriers in cross-border cooperation and mitigating these barriers' impact on territorial cooperation in Central and Eastern Europe. And in this slide, you can see the results of research Eurobarometer from 2015. I know that this is old research. However, this is last one available on the European Union website. And you can see that when European societies were asked whether they note some barriers in their relations, on some borders, people say that these differences in legal administrative rules of existence of some organizations and public and commercial institutions, this is not a problem for them. In some borderlands, still such differences are perceived as a problem. In some border, like for example, border between Czech Republic and Slovakia, the same percentage of respondents perceive these differences as totally a problem or not a problem at all. Yes, you know, Czechia and Slovakia in the past, it was one country. So there are maybe not so many differences in their legal administrative systems. However, for example, on Polish-Czech and Polish-Slovak borders, there are many administrative differences, for example, in public procurement, in the processes of company establishment, in the processes of investment development. And therefore, in cross-border initiatives, cross-border undertakings, we suffer these differences when we want to develop cross-border cooperation. We have to be very tolerant. We have to find a compromise to finish the investments together. And this is still a crucial problem for Central and European Union societies, border societies, how to develop cross-border cooperation, how to achieve the higher level of cross-border cooperation, considering that we still can see these differences, administrative and legal differences in our systems as a problem in our relations. So this is not easy to establish cross-border cooperation models like Euro-regions or EGTCs or functional areas. And believe me, I know what I'm saying because I was evaluator commissioned by Polish government and Czech government. I was evaluator of Interreg programs on Polish-Czech and Polish-Slovak border. And this is the cover of my report from Polish-Slovak borderland, which I developed in 2019, when I also identified some barriers and obstacles which harm cross-border cooperation development in that area. And of course, I reported all these barriers to Commission and on the level of national authorities responsible for the program to address these barriers in the next edition of the program. And the same was on the Polish-Czech borderland, where I also prepared such a report in the last year. We evaluated the results of Interreg program interventions in all priority or axes of cross-border cooperation, and still we noted many different obstacles and barriers in cross-border cooperation. Why I'm emphasizing this issue so much? Because, you know, when we discuss how to develop cross-border functional area, the main issue is to address the problem with cross-border obstacles and to let cross-border flows to be developed among commuters, on the labor market, on the educational market, in transportation and in other sectors. And when I prepared my presentation for the European Week of Regions and Cities to Brussels last year, it was last year, I also asked my colleagues from other Central Eastern European borders what are their opinions concerning obstacles and barriers in cross-border cooperation. And believe me, doesn't matter whether it's Polish, Slovak, Hungarian, Romanian, Lithuanian, Latvian border, or Ukrainian, Slovakian border, or Polish-Czech border, opinions are similar. So see, we all suffer more or less the same types of cross-border barriers, cross-border obstacles, and still we can't find the solution how to counteract them, how to mitigate their impact on borders. Of course, we have such a nice tool as B-Solution program, developed by Martin Guillermo Ramirez, who also presented during this course, probably yesterday, as far as I remember, and probably he told you about B-Solution program. However, believe me, even application to B-Solution program is challenging for some entities, and not so many public institutions or on Central and Eastern European borderlands are eager to submit a proposal to B-Solution program to try to find a solution for their cross-border cooperation barriers. So still Martin complains that he receives far more applications from Western borderlands than from Central and Eastern borderlands. and every Eastern European borderlands, and every time we meet, Martin encourages me and other partners from this part of Europe to submit a proposal and to try to find the way to mitigate this impact barrier on cross-border cooperation. But as I said, this is very challenging. And considering the current situation in Central Eastern Europe, let me also mention new barrier which has appeared since 1 year or so. This is strongly related with migrants' influx to Europe. You are probably aware that we suffer a huge wave of migrants from Middle East, which were invited by Russian and Belarusian government, and they are staying very close to Polish-Belarusian. They are staying on Polish-Belarusian border, frankly, and Lithuanian-Belarusian border, and they attack borders every day. They want to cross the border and they want to go not to Poland, they want to go to Germany, to France, to other Western European countries. And this situation caused the problem with crossing borders for all citizens of this part of European Union, because, for example, again, the controls on border checkpoint was announced, and we have to wait in the long lines to cross the border with Germany, cross the border with Slovakia, we have to wait in long lines to close other European borders when we travel by car, for example. And the reason is that the migrants' influx. So this is another barrier which we have to face even within Schengen area. And believe me, when Poland and other countries entered the Schengen area, we never thought that it can happen, that the border crossing points will be established again. But it happened right now. It happens right now. So this is another barrier we have to face. And of course, when discussing commuting, when discussing cross-border flows, for example, in terms of labor market, public services, transportation, this is a huge problem for European citizens, how to cross the border when we have so strict controls on the borders against migrants. So considering the possible solutions to increase the level of cross-border cooperation, to governments this cooperation, to coordinate cross-border project implementations and evaluations, it is important to establish bodies who will be responsible for this. And the one solution is to establish Euroregions. And probably you heard a lot about Euroregions because they are well-developed bodies, mainly in Western Europe, but lots of Euroregions also exist in Poland. I mean, Polish, Czech, Polish, Slovak, Polish-German borderland and other borderlands in Central and Eastern Europe. And they are very convenient institutional mechanism of cross-border cooperation development. Of course, they have limited possibilities to mitigate some barriers in cross-border cooperation and to develop some directions of cross-border cooperation, for example, in terms of economic, social, cultural, tourism, heritage matters, but also they encourage actors existing in borderlands to start cross-border relations, because still many entities existing in the borderlands do not develop any cross-border relations, which is very sad when we consider that we would like to develop this type of collaboration, and we would like to establish cross-border functional areas also on other on some Central or Eastern European borderlands. So, for example, when we analyze the situation along the Polish borders, you can see here 18 Euroregions located along to the Polish borders, they work as cooperating associations. Means that, for example, local authorities which create together a Euroregion on the Polish side, they cooperate within one association. And for example, Czech local authorities, public bodies, local governments who want to cooperate with Polish partners, they create another association, and these two associations, they create together Euroregion, and Euroregion doesn't have legal entity authority, but it is like a representation of partners from both sides of the border who want to collaborate under this Euroregion. And you can see in this slide also the dates of establishment, the years of establishment of these 19 Euroregions. They are more or less 30 years old. And frankly, some of these Euroregions were established together with Russian and Belarusian partners. And now, after military aggression of Russia on Ukraine, of course, Polish, Czech, Polish partners, Lithuanian partners, Latvian partners, Estonian partners, they cut collaboration with Russian and Russian partners, and on some Euroregions with Belarusian partners also. But I hope that you understand this situation, because it was not possible to continue collaboration when we suffer this aggression every day. Therefore, they changed a little bit their activities. But since Poland and other Central and Eastern European countries have joined the European Union, we used via Euroregions many funds from cross-border cooperation programs, particularly Interreg programs on each borderland, and of course the amount of money assigned for each Euroregion, for each border. It is related to the length of the border, but also I would say that this is the result of lobbying or activities of partners who establish Euroregions, and they seek funds for their investments. So they also encourage European Union to assign them additional money for their needs. So frankly, without these funds, I think that cross-border cooperation in Central and Eastern Europe would stay on the preliminary level. It was the main incentive to start cross-border relations for many border actors when they realized that this kind of activity can be connected with additional funds from the European Union. This is sad, but on the other hand, this is reality, how it works in this part of Europe. So considering the research which I mentioned at the beginning, research of Andrzej Jakubowski and his team, research on analyzing cross-border linkages on Polish borderlands, I can show you the results of his research. He measured the distance between partners on both sides of the border, and he also analyzed the partnership concentration index. He created this index, and he also followed this index when he created a map, which is visible in this slide. And this map shows the distribution of cross-border relations along to the Polish borders. Of course, they are Euroregions visible in the slides. I mean Euroregions which cover the cross-border partnerships which were analyzed in this research. And you can see that we have very, very, I would say, intensive cross-border cooperation in the north and in the southeast. I mean Rzeszów and Kraków, mainly Rzeszów, and also Rzeszów. This is the town located on the Polish-Slovak-Ukrainian border, close to the Polish-Slovak-Ukrainian border, but they are also a strong relation with Ukrainian partners, with Lithuanian partners, and with partners like Denmark, Sweden, Finland from Baltic Sea area. Considering this research, I will continue in the second part of this lecture after the break, when I will present you the process of designing cross-border functional area according to the methodology prepared by Andrzej Jakubowski. Maybe you have any questions concerning this part of the lecture?
Yes, there are two questions in the chat, Joanna. One by Faith Matenge. Faith asks you, kindly explain the dominant peripheral character problem, because she doesn't understand it, and I think it's a very important question. It's a good one. And then the other one is by Claire Guillemin, who came a little late to introduce herself. Claire, you could introduce yourself briefly as well, but let me read the question. Interreg is an important tool, but it only applies in Europe. What other tools would be available, other international programs that could support funding for the establishment of programs in favor of cross-border cooperation in other non-European areas, such as the Dominican Haitian border? We see that often there is a lack of funds to boost local initiatives in cross-border territories. I think that's a really important point, and it's, you know, and Claire is involved in some negotiations on that boundary, on that diet between Dominican and Haitian countries, and so I think it's quite interesting. If you could address them both, and then we'll see. If you have questions for Joanna, it's a good time to actually raise your hand or put the question,
or just write in the chat.
In the chat, yes.
Okay, so considering these questions about the Interreg, of course, I do not have big knowledge about the situation in Africa, but I can give you an example of Mercosur. I visited Brazil 2 years ago, Rio Grande do Sul and Federal University of Porto Alegre. We have Brazilian colleague, and probably you know this case. And I can see that Mercosur funds can be very similar to, can be considered as very similar to Interreg program in Europe, because Mercosur, this association also provides funds for such local partnerships among Uruguayan, Paraguayan, Argentinian and Brazilian colleagues, yes, partners, to boost cross-border linkages. And see, there is a case that it should be organizations like an organization like an umbrella on some national governments, which has a power to convince the governments that it is important to provide the funds to boost collaboration on the local level. And another issue is, for example, Visegrad Group. Maybe you know this solution. This is group connecting Poland, Czechia, Slovakia, and Hungary, which also assigned lots of money for cooperation on the local level between these countries. But frankly, because of political differences between governments, now it doesn't work as well as it worked in the past. Because you probably know that the differences between Viktor Orban policy and Slovak government policy and current policy of the Polish government and Czech government, which you know, there are big differences, for example, in terms of collaboration with Ukraine and support of Ukrainian colleagues against this Russian aggression. Yes, so this is the case when political issues are really crucial when you want to convince governments to assign some funds for such collaboration. And I'm very sad that I can't give you a clear solution how to solve this problem in Africa. But for sure, it's in my opinion, such initiative should start on the international level of course, it can be grassroots initiatives when local leaders, regional leaders who are very active, they are able to convince the governments to start discussion about international collaboration and supporting of cross-border collaboration. But I consider this process as a long-term process, and there is no guarantee that it can be successful. It depends not only on the willingness of parties, of negotiating parties, but also, I would say, of motivation of those who are planned to participate in this cross-border cooperation initiatives and projects, because without, genuine motivation to do this, it's really hard to convince people to start some projects. So this is my answer for this question. I don't know whether I answered according to the expectation of Clyde.
So the other question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
The other question was, can you explain the dominant peripheral character problem?
Okay.
What is it?
Okay, when Central and Eastern European countries were under Iron Curtain, yes, there was a general rule that borderlands, this like a military zones, yes? So they were almost empty. Only military installations were there, and very low level of, very low number of inhabitants, because there were strategic area, yes, and borders were under strict protection and control. So it was not easy to live there in borderlands, and therefore governments didn't invest in commercial infrastructure, social infrastructure there, yes, in public transportation. And now when we compare the level of development, borderlands and other Polish, Czech, Slovak regions, we see big difference. And another issue is that in many cases, borders, they are physical borders like mountains, rivers, and therefore it's not so good space to, to invest, to develop industries, and therefore we call this area as peripheral area or a marginalized area.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And we have a question also from Tatiana.
Tatiana, okay.
I have a question about governance of ecological issues on the border between Poland and Belarus. It's called the Puszcza area, which is a national park and one of the largest forests in Europe, which has been preserved to this day in a relatively untouched state, and which territory is divided by the state borders in two parts. One is Belarusian, the other one is Polish. Is there any strategy on the national level in Poland to tackle any issues arising there together with Belarusian stakeholders?
Okay, so from my side, as far as I know, communication with Belarusian partners has stopped from the Polish side. There are two issues, yes, the support of Belarus for Russian aggression against Ukraine, and another issue, this is this migrant crisis on Polish-Belarusian borders. And of course, I can imagine that this area also suffers of this situation, because as far as I know, many migrants who try to, to cross the Polish border, they stay in that area. So I can imagine that this area is even devastated right now because of the current situation, the same as Polish natural heritage Puszcza Białowieska on the Polish side. However, I think that considering how serious is the political and military situation in that area, this issue is on the second position right now in, in the communication between both governments. I believe that there is a communication between Polish and Belarusian government, maybe informal communication, but still there is in communication. But I think that first they have to solve the problems with migrant crisis, and only then they will be able to start discussion about, restoration of cross-border relations, which were really good before the war. On the local level, Polish-Belarusian relations were really good. I was even invited for a Polish-Belarusian conference to Białystok to discuss about development of mutual relations just before the war. And of course, this conference was cancelled. There was no discussion about such issues when we experienced the Russian aggression on Ukraine, and of course it's helpful role of Belarus in this process. However, I strongly believe that there will be a moment when the war finishes, when we will be able to start communication with Belarusian partners, maybe in more democratic circumstances, and start also discussion about such, I would say, valuable natural heritage as is this Puszcza. Thank you very much for this question, Tatiana.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you.
What is your opinion, Tatiana?
Thank you. Thank you both.
Okay.
We have a question from Edison here. Can you give any example of local arrangements in Euro regions? In what areas?
Okay.
Education, transport, custom procedures.
Okay. For example, I'm author of 3 or 4 cross-border strategies on Euro-regional collaboration. And at the very beginning of the process, I invited people from both sides of the border, these local actors, and I asked them to agree the areas of collaboration which they want to develop together. So, this is up to them. In some strategies, we pointed out education, cultural and natural heritage protection, tourism, health services as main areas of collaboration. In other strategies, particularly those which have been developed after the pandemic, we put big attention on health services and their availability on both sides of the border for commuters. We put also attention on people-to-people relation because they deteriorated during pandemic dramatically. But we also started to discuss about sustainable development, energy transition process, about artificial intelligence impact on some cross-border relations. I know there may be very innovative topic, but on the other hand, such documents, such programs and strategies could be like a natural reaction on the ongoing situation on the borderland. Yes, they should address the issues which are really important for people who live there in the borderland, who cooperate daily together. So there can be different areas of collaboration. This is voluntary. It depends only on people who discuss these documents, who develop these documents together. This is only their decision. Custom procedures, no, because this area is assigned for the national level. But on the other hand, on the internal European borders, there's no custom problems.
Joanna, I think we can start again, and we have a question from Jafet. He says, so it's a long question, and then we have a question in the room also from David here. So the question from Jafet is, I have been following this discussion intently and as part of my observation, I noticed that political distance is a major stumbling block for this kind of cooperation. In most cases, we look at immediate relationship between neighboring countries. but we forget the complexities associated with indirect relationships backing the countries of interest. We may notice that countries may fail to cooperate due to relationship between their other partners who are in the background. The mere effort to try and cooperate may be in direct conflict with other relationships in the background. So I think that's a really interesting point, and it does apply, to the Iron Curtain and the history between the different countries.
I fully agree with this opinion. This is not a question, this is just like a statement, but I fully agree with this point of view.
And then you have the other opinion, then another issue of interest will be the issue of funding. I think in most cases, government funding of cross-border projects may face hurdle associated with red tape or political will. One option that may bypass such problem will be to go through private-public partnerships. The private part becomes the face of the project, while the government is in the background. Private players find cross-border cooperation easier, and so on and so forth. Jafet, this is such an interesting question, because I think it applies very well to the North American case, where this is why, it's so important to have listened to Matt Morrison when he talks about how the private sector is always trying to, in a way, create bridges, but they also point to all the hurdles that they have to cross to be able to partner. Now, I don't know the situation as well in Poland, so we're going to let Joanna answer this.
It's completely different.
And then we come to David to his question.
Let me explain briefly. The situation is completely different. When we consider Interreg funds, which are guaranteed by the European Union, directly DG Regio, yes, there is equal approach to distribution of Interreg funds among all European borderlands. Of course, as I said, it depends on the length of the border, but also on the activities of the local actors who lobby for this money. When we consider the private investments, it's different situation, because businesses, SMEs, they do not see their clear interest in establishing relations with partners from the other side of the border. It is really strange, and I was surprised. But when I started my work for the European Commission on the Polish-Lithuanian borderland, I discovered that in terms of collaboration in tourism industry, this is mainly cooperation between local authorities, local governments, sometimes chambers of commerce operating in tourism sector as NGOs. But there was almost no cooperation between businesses. And people who invested money in hotels, restaurants, tourism attractions, they didn't see the interest in collaboration with partners on the other side of the border. And what is also important, that in Interreg programs, commercial entities are not eligible. That means that Interreg funds are available only for public bodies and social entities like NGOs, as I said, chambers of commerce, but still NGOs. No commercial entities can apply for these funds. And this is very imbalanced cross-border cooperation because of this situation, because we have quite a nice level of cross-border cooperation between local governments, public institutions, schools, universities, hospitals, NGOs, but there was almost no collaboration between entities, between business entities. And I can't understand this. But when I started to organize some workshops, some debates for local actors, people on the ground, to listen their opinion about cross-border cooperation, about boosting cross-border cooperation, many of them told me, hey, I can't see any interest in establishing cross-border relations. And this is very sad, yes, because we invested a lot to teach people that, for example, cross-border tourism products can be a nice result of cross-border cooperation, and they can attract more tourists to the borderland. But still, businesses, they do not see their interest in this. So this is probably a different situation than in Western Europe and in other continents.
Joanna, I have a question for you. I was very interested to hear about your description of the Iron Curtain in Poland and how the Soviet Union wanted to have tight control over any cross-border relations.
Full control.
Out of fear, it sounds like, and wanting to control those places. I find it an interesting parallel that current day situation in Ukraine, specifically in Donbass and other eastern regions, had very strong cross-border relations with Russia, and those connections were used to justify some of these aggressions,
yes,
as from cultural and economic standpoint. So in a way, it's Russia is expressing the fear it had from the Soviet Union times. And do you see that kind of fear applied to other Eastern European countries about cross-border relations as a pretext to losing their sovereignty?
For example, Estonia. There is a country with big Russian minority. And for example, when I visited Tallinn, this is capital of Estonia, I was surprised that so many people spoke Russian, not Estonian, but Russian. And as far as I know, neighboring regions of Estonia and Latvia, also Lithuania, there are lots of fears about the behavior of Russian minorities in these countries, because frankly, these groups can even support in the future the Russian aggression on these countries. And believe me, we also feel many concerns. We afraid of this situation. I live in Polish-Czech-Slovak borderland, in the south of Poland. This is about 400 kilometers of Lviv. Yes, so I'm relatively safe here. But believe me, people, we watch television every day. We follow the news from Polish-Ukrainian and Polish-Belarusian border, and the same my Lithuanian, Latvian, and Estonian colleagues, because every day we afraid what can happen. Whether another Russian rocket, attacks Polish territory, as it happened several times last year. Yes. And there will be just like one accident, and huge war can start because of this. So they should be very careful reaction of NATO on such accidents. Yes, do not extend the conflict. But on the other hand, people who live here in Eastern Europe, we feel this. Concerns this very, very serious situation. We suffer it every day here.
Yeah, this is and Joanna, this is why I'm so happy that you're with us, because you kind of give some sense. People read this in the media and they're not aware of how people live through the situation in the border. And last year when we met, obviously, we met at the conference not very far from the border of Ukraine. I realized that all of my colleagues from all of the East European countries, all of them were really anxious. Everybody was anxious.
Yes, and
it was not just the Polish colleagues. It was colleagues who came from, I met colleagues from Lithuania, Slovenia, and Finland, and everybody was anxious. And the elected officials, because I was also at the conference organized by the ABR, which Martin Guillaume organized, the elected officials who came from these different countries that are, in a way, in the eastern part of Europe, were also very anxious. And they were so happy that the partnership allowed for the conference to be organized so close to the Ukrainian border, and that there'd be a trip to go into Ukraine, And some people went, I know they sent 2 buses, 90 people went to show solidarity on the Ukrainian side. So
Yes,
it's very
but
important.
believe me, I was so nervous when I traveled there. I had so many fears, but thanks to this conference, I met Miroslava from Uzhhorod. And I can tell you that Miroslava has been supported by Visegrad International Fund for her secondment to my institute. So I invited Miroslava from Uzhhorod to Poland. And this year, Miroslava will participate in the conference in Dąbrowa Górnicza, which I also invited you. And Tatiana also, I hope. Because I was so unhappy when Tatiana couldn't cross the border last year. Tatiana, you remember, we were waiting for you in Brenna, and there was no way to cross the border because of this serious situation, yes, and you had to go back to Minsk. I was very disappointed, but this is the reality of how we live.
Yeah, and Tatiana was unable to come also to the European Parliament when we organized the conference early June. She stayed almost 2 full days, 48 hours in a bus at the border, and then she had to go back into Minsk. She was unable to cross. Anyway, let's not discuss this. You have so much to present, but it's very hard. It's a hard situation.
And the act of our
thank you so much,
solidarity,
Joanna.
and I would say just one sentence. And the act of our solidarity with Ukrainian colleagues, for example, the case of International Visegrad Fund, which established a specific rules for inviting Ukrainian universities and Ukrainian colleagues to the international projects funded for Slovak, Czech, Poles, and Hungarian by Visegrad Fund. And thanks to this, now we can collaborate with Uzhhorod, with some universities from Lviv, and with other Ukrainian colleagues. And these funds have been secured by International Visegrad Fund. So not only Interreg, but also other financial tools have been introduced for European academic bodies to strengthen relations with Ukrainian colleagues and invite Ukrainian professors, researchers, scholars to Poland to let them feel better, at least for some time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Joanna. Let's proceed. Thank you.
Okay, guys, the second part of my lecture. This time I will follow on the methodology of my colleague, Andrzej Jakubowski, who probably some of you know quite well. And Andrzej prepared a very valuable methodology how to design cross-border functional area on the European borderlands. And I can tell you that this methodology was highly appreciated during the European Week of Regions and Cities in Brussels 2 years ago. And I also invited Andrzej to my team when I established the cross-border functional area on the Polish-Lithuanian borderland. And we followed directly this methodology, which I would like to present you briefly today. Yes. So what is cross-border functional area? Yes. When we would like to define this very specific space, we should follow 2 definitions or 2 approaches. So first of all, we can call this area as a territories that cluster around nodes. Nodes could be urban centers, but also twin towns, cities divided by the border, for example. And also they are territories which concentrate systemic relations. For example, labor market nodes or something like this. And another approach that cross-border functional area, there should be areas, territories, delineated according to the some defining criteria. There could be 1 criterion or more criteria that determine the cohesion, potential, and specificity of internal and external interactions within this territory. And there is exactly the case of touristic cross-border functional area, which will be presented in the 3rd part of the lecture. So when I would like, if I want to define cross-border functional area, I have to point out some characteristics. First of all, this is the area located on 2 or more sides of the state border, like Polish-Lithuanian borderland, or Polish-Ukrainian-Slovakian borderland, or Polish-Czech-German borderland. We have some examples of such cross-border functional areas. Another issue is that such an area should be defined not only by administrative borders, like not free statistical level, but also by cross-border functional linkages. For example, partnerships between towns, partnerships between schools, universities, cross-border projects, and other linkages which resulting from special and socioeconomic specific characteristics, features of the area. For example, if Polish-Lithuanian borderland is distinguished by tourist potential, therefore, when we design such an area, because it has been completed, yes, when we design such an area, we analyzed the border of the space which is distinguished by this touristic potential. And the third feature is that this is the area characterized by the system of cooperative relationships between various stakeholders. So it shouldn't be only relations between local authorities, public institutions, as I said, but also business entities, social actors, and inhabitants should be strongly involved in such collaboration. But unfortunately, it's not like this in many areas. And the last but not the least feature, that this is the area which should have a specific governance mechanisms which can be provided by Euroregion or the European Group of Territorial Cooperation, or maybe other bodies. But this mechanism of collaboration should be agreed among partners and should be, of course, respected by all partners. And in this way, it's possible to manage the development on this area on both sides of the border. And when we analyze the criteria, how we want to define, identify cross-border functional areas, we have to take into account 4 criteria created by Andrzej Jakubowski, but also implemented in the case which is visible in this slide, cross-border functional area on the Polish-Lithuanian borderland, and we also followed these 4 criteria when we designed this area. So first criteria is cross-border location. It's crucial to analyze the distance between the entity and the border. For example, in our case, the distance, the travel distance from the border checkpoint to the entity included in the area is not more than 60-minute driving. So area which are located, for example, 2-hour driving from border, they can't be considered as a part of functional area. And another issue is transport accessibility. Of course, you need the network of roads, public transport connections to provide cross-border flows, which are characteristic for cross-border functional area. So cross-border location, this is the main issue. Believe me, when I established the functional area on the Polish-Lithuanian borderland, there were so many disputes who can be included in the area. Why? Because European Commission promised additional funds for cross-border functional area development. And many border actors, they were aware of this potential benefits for those who will be a part of functional areas, and they fighted who can be a part of this, yes? What will be the boundaries of the area? And I had to find some arguments to delineate the area according to the reasonable criteria, not to include everyone who would like to be included, but I had to include only those who really met this criteria. So cross-border location, this is first criteria. Second is functional relationship. Well, functional linkages, I think there is no discussion that this is crucial when we consider establishment of cross-border functional area, because we have to count and measure cross-border flows. For example, we can establish cross-border linkages between two universities. Yes, I have some relations with Czech universities, and the frequency of travels between our universities, frequency of common activities, joint lectures, cross-border projects, cross-border field trips, cross-border research. This is the result of cross-border cooperation and cross-border flows, which can be considered whether we can be a part of cross-border functional area or not. And the same with local governments. And in some cases, believe me, there is a situation that local authority, which is located directly on the border, doesn't collaborate with neighboring authority on the other side border. Can you imagine such situation? But I can tell you that on Polish-Lithuanian borderland, there were many situations like this. And only when we started our project, we started to encourage these people to meet together, to know each other better, to start discussion. Of course, language barriers are a crucial problem because, for example, Polish and Lithuanian languages, they are completely different and we can't understand each other. But for example, Poles and Czechs, we can understand without any problems. Poles and Belarusians, Poles and Ukrainians, we can understand without bigger problems, but with Lithuanian, unfortunately not. So sometimes a language barrier is a problem. Oh, I'm frozen. Can you hear me? Okay, because I don't know why I'm frozen.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So sometimes it's a problem. How to establish these relations, these linkages, and of course, without such relations, measurable relations, it's really hard to design a cross-border functional area. And cross-border cooperation, what does it mean? I distinguish with cross-border integration and cross-border cooperation. And I understand cross-border integration as people-to-people relations. Yes, cross-border people-to-people relations between friends, between relatives, between, I don't know, colleagues who cooperate in the same industry. For example, I cooperate with professors from the other side of the border. And this is like cross-border integration. But when our universities collaborate, this is cross-border cooperation because this is institutional cooperation between two universities. And they are, of course, different areas of collaboration, different purposes of such collaboration, but both I would say behaviors are important. Yes, organizational behavior in terms of cross-border cooperation development and people-to-people relations in terms of development cross-border integration. So both situations should exist in the borderland when we consider the establishment of cross-border functional area. And the last but not the least is governance. And governance is crucial because how to agree on the common goals, common activities, common undertakings without governance, yes? That means that if you want to develop cross-border functional area, you have to provide at least one efficient mechanism of governance such area, which could be Euro-region or European group of territorial collaboration. And when you analyze the situation in borderland and you can confirm that the area meets all these four criteria: cross-border location, tangible, functional cross-border relationships and linkages among partners from both sides of the border, the intensive cross-border cooperation and cross-border integration among people, and the provided mechanism of governance of the area, then the preliminary conditions to establish cross-border functional area are met. And now you can see the results of the work of Andrzej when he marked on the map of Poland, cross-border locations of NUTS-free units along to Polish border. And it was the first criteria to identify cross-border functional areas along to Polish borders.
Joanna, I need to ask you, what is NUTS-free? Nobody knows.
This is
Yeah,
like
people don't know
sub-region.
what it is outside of Europe.
This is statistical unit which is applied in the whole European Union, and this is size of sub-region. For example, we have voivodeships, we have provinces or regions, yes, and they are divided into sub-regions. This is the level of NUTS-free. It's hard for me now to give you the full definition of this. And another criteria, cross-border relationships. Look, he analyzed the functional criteria based on significant cross-border flows in terms of tourists, in terms of labor market, in terms of public services, public transportation, and it is visible, they are visible in the slide. But he also mentioned the area designed according to the geographical criteria. As I mentioned, there are some, let's say, physical obstacles, physical barriers to provide connectivity of the area. And he put it here in the slide on another map. And then he also developed another map when he mentioned the socioeconomic criteria. That means that he designed area covering with similar development potentials or area requiring restructuring and development of new functions, area which are the subject of strong depopulation processes, industrial and post-industrial areas, areas with particular potential for tourism development. And this is the tiered map visible in this slide. And then he counted cross-border partnerships. He used the European Union database KEEP EU, and he counted partnerships along to Polish borders, Polish-Lithuanian, Polish-Ukrainian, Polish-Czech, Polish-Slovak, and Polish-German partnerships, but also partnerships with other Baltic countries like Denmark or Finland, which are also active in Euroregion Baltic. And in this way, he designed a map of potential cross-border linkages and intensity and number of linkages and intensity of cross-border cooperation. And he also prepared separate maps for some areas of collaboration. You can see here that, for example, cross-border cooperation on Polish borders is the most distinguished in terms of maritime areas, tourism, and institutional cooperation. I mean that the number and intensity of relations is the biggest in this area. For example, almost no cross-border cooperation in terms of innovativeness. Look, municipal economy, some partnerships in terms of security. This is also visible in the north, on the Polish-Lithuanian borderland. Look, so he prepared such maps to show in which areas cross-border cooperation along to Polish borders is the strongest. And then he also analyzed the potential mechanisms of governance cross-border functional area. I mean Euroregions located along to the Polish borderlands, and additional governance mechanisms, which are European groups of territorial cooperation, which are mainly located on the Polish, Czech, and Polish-German border. And 2 new EGTCs were announced on the Polish-Lithuanian border, but they are not visible in this map yet. So according to this, Andrzej clustered the partnerships along to the Polish border, and particularly in terms of tourism, because we were strongly interested in cross-border cooperation in tourism, because we wanted to check whether it is possible and feasible to establish cross-border touristic functional area on the Polish-Lithuanian borderland. And you can see here in this slide that Andrzej proven this, that it's possible, because the number of cross-border linkages in terms of tourism on the Polish-Lithuanian borderlands, as well as some other features of the territory, I mean the tourism potential, and number of, for example, number of SMEs operating in tourism sector, number of tourism attractions, number of cultural and historical and natural heritage attractions, and other issues related to tourism development, they are visible in that border. So in this way, Andrzej proven that it's possible and feasible, and this is reasonable to establish touristic cross-border functional area on the Polish-Lithuanian borderland. And it's also visible in the last slide in this presentation, when you can see the potential cross-border functional area delineated according to the Andrzej methodology. Andrzej suggested such area in the north of Poland, in the region of Baltic Sea, and another both cross-border functional area and cross-border touristic functional area and tourist destination on the Polish-Lithuanian borderland, but also some other potential touristic cross-border functional area on the Polish-Slovak and Polish-Czech and Polish-German borderland. And this is like a preliminary map for the European Commission, for DG Regio, when Polish entities and neighboring entities apply for establishment of cross-border functional area. They have this evidence provided by Andrzej Jakubowski, and they can compare the expectations and diagnosis prepared by the bodies which apply to develop cross-border functional areas on their borders, and of course the statistical data and estimations prepared by Andrzej. And according to this estimation, European Commission also commissioned me and Andrzej and other colleagues to establish cross-border touristic functional area on the Polish-Lithuanian borderland. And I would like to present this area in the 3rd part of my lecture. So this is the end of the 2nd part, guys.
Okay, do we have questions or comments on this? One of the things that I noticed is that Andrzej has collected data on different policy arenas, including security and some other ones. I took a picture, but you have one of the slides that is really interesting because it shows the different functional area per policy arenas. And I think that if we could come back to it just to show the class very quickly, it would be fabulous.
Okay, so let me share the screen. You mean this? You mean this slide?
The one where you have the 8 small tables.
Okay, you mean this?
Yes. See, what I find so interesting here is that you actually see on the map very different patterns of collaboration and cooperation. The networks on security, for instance, are much smaller, right? Exactly. You can see the security on the top left. But when you compare to tourism, or even if you compare to maritime area and inland water, for instance, right, or institutional cooperation, you can see that they are very different networks, even if you compare, for instance, to tourism or transport and mobility, right? This is what Andrzej called the functional areas, right? So if we take certain policy arenas that we are interested in elsewhere in the world, not just the borders of Poland, we may find very different patterns. We may find, for instance, patterns where we have no security whatsoever. We have no municipal economy. We have no innovation. And we have a lot of tourism.
Exactly.
I think in Canada, for instance, if we were to redo the study and we compare these different areas, we would find that transport and mobility looks like tourism, and tourism would look like transport and mobility. If we were to do, for instance, the Penware area, right, which Matt Morrison discussed with us, we would see so much transport and mobility because there are, as you know, 8.2 million crossings between Canada and the US on the Pacific coast. And the tourism would be a portion of this. It would be so much smaller. So I think in your own regions, you could obviously use the same kind of research system if you were interested in and discover very different patterns. But it also illustrates, I think, that the form of governance that you have of these different policy arenas vary greatly, right?
Yes, so I can say that considering Polish case, cross-border cooperation is very imbalanced. Yes, in some areas, this is very dynamic, intensive, for example, tourism, yes, as you said, or maritime areas in the north. And for example, in security, it's not so intensive, it's not so well developed. And it is a big concern, yes, considering the situation in the north and on the Polish-Russian and Polish-Belarusian border. But it's improving now all the time.
So we have a comment from Jafet, who I think can unmute and take the floor. Please take the floor, Jafet.
All right. Thank you so much. So my first observation is that actually I wanted to use that slide, the one that you were sharing, with the one with 8 maps.
Okay, once again. Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, when I'm looking at this, and it is my observation that all these patterns that we are seeing are actually patterns that we observed from natural movement of either corporates or maybe individuals moving across borders. So my thinking is, obviously we are going to see different patterns maybe from different countries. And like you said, there are certain elements of no cross-border cooperation in certain areas, like for example, the second map, you look at, is it municipal economy, and the one where you said regional and local development. And my thinking now is, if we have got that situation, chances are there could be other barriers. Because the first thing that I noticed was the movement of people. For example, tourism could be people being drawn by other factors. And in the case of regional and local development, I think that for one reason or the other, there could be barriers to the development of this natural pattern that shows that there is cross-border relationship. Like you mentioned in the previous lecture, that, for example, let's say we have got a mountainous area. It could actually act as a hindrance and actually create a visualization that appear as if there is no cooperation. I'm thinking, like, using this kind of analysis, you can actually try to counter those barriers. Like, for example, if there is a lake that is preventing cooperation between two countries, why can't you come up with some other mechanism to try and encourage that kind of cooperation, either through channeling that barrier? Let's say there is no regional and local cooperation, but we can actually encourage development of something else like tourism on the same area. Yes, there is nothing at the moment because of the barrier, maybe existence of a lake along the border. If we like introduce tourism that is related to the use of the lake, we may come up with a very different map, or we can actually encourage some development of other cross-border functional areas. That's my take. Thank you.
Okay. And I can tell you that these maps also present the impact of Interreg program on cross-border cooperation on the Polish borders, because as I mentioned, some areas of collaboration are not eligible. And for example, innovativeness is not eligible because innovativeness is relevant mainly for businesses, yes? Public institutions, they are far less interested in development of innovative solutions as businesses are. And if because businesses are not eligible as beneficiaries of Interreg program, you can see usually in this slide that in terms of innovativeness, cross-border cooperation is very poor, yes? But for example, tourism is strongly supported by the Interreg program. And you can see in this slide that cross-border relations in terms of tourism are very, very dynamic and very tangible and well visible. That means that cross-border collaboration in terms of tourism is far better developed than, for example, in terms of security or, for example, municipal economy. Yes. Because when Andrzej created this map, he used data from, he used the database which presents cross-border projects on the European borderlands and projects supported by the Interreg program. Because we didn't have access to other projects, for example, business projects, which were not included in this database, yes? That means that this vision of cross-border cooperation is only based on the evaluation of the involvement of Interreg program and its support for cross-border cooperation on the Polish borderlands. Do you understand me, what I mean?
Yeah, yes, I do.
This is not the entire vision. This is only like a filter of cross-border cooperation supported by the Interreg program.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Actually, I find it very interesting. It can help in areas where there is no form of cooperation. People may try to, actually, the institutions may try to come up with something that can help.
Yes, because when you consider how to develop cross-border cooperation, first you have to provide the diagnosis. And diagnosis means that you have counted these linkages, you have measured these relations, yes? You have, first of all, identified these cross-border linkages. And such maps and such tools and mechanisms of measurement of cross-border cooperation could be very helpful, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Joanna, I have a question in the room from Edison.
Okay.
About how Andres collected the indicators to create the map. Where does the data come from?
Data was from the European database KEEP EU, which is a database for cross-border projects supported by the Interreg program across the European borders.
Very good. Thank you very much.
All of this information about partnerships and cross-border projects and the areas of collaboration from this database. So in the last part of my lecture, let me present you a case study on designing a touristic cross-border functional area in the Polish-Lithuanian borderland. And it was a pilot project financially supported directly by the European Commission DG Regio to provide a role model and roadmap how to establish such an area in the Central and Eastern European borderlands, because as I mentioned previously, there are many differences, for example, between the greater region, Luxembourg, France, Germany, Belgium, and, for example, Polish, Czech, Slovak borderland or Polish-Lithuanian borderland. So such a process, I mean, designing cross-border functional area requires a different approach and different mechanism, more specific mechanism. And together with Andrzej Jakubowski and other colleagues, we were responsible for designing such a roadmap for these people, but the Commission didn't expect that we established the area. They only expected the roadmap, but eventually we convinced all these local actors to establish such an area. So it was like an additional value for the European Commission of our job. Okay, but from the very beginning, I mean, Polish-Lithuanian local actors who are located very close to the border, they learned that cross-border functional area can be very good solution for them to increase the level of cross-border linkages, and as I told you previously, to gain additional European funds from DG Regio. And therefore, they signed agreement in 2018 that their joint intention is to develop cross-border functional area to improve the quality of life in the Polish-Lithuanian borderland. At that moment, I'm sure they didn't know what is cross-border functional area, but they heard from the members of European Parliament that this solution could be very, very profitable for them in the future. Yeah? So they decided to sign such an agreement and then applied to the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs to give them money for diagnosis of cross-border linkages, cross-border relations, some other characteristics of cross-border cooperation in that borderland, yes, to provide a background for development of such area in the future. And they received this money and they conducted research on establishing economic, cultural, educational, and tourism relations between inhabitants of the border zone, Poland and Lithuania. And frankly, when they completed this study, they sent it to European Commission to support Commission to provide them funds to develop a pilot project on establishing such an area in the Polish-Lithuanian borderland. And the Commission accepted their idea as very innovative approach to cross-border cooperation in the borderland when the general level of cross-border cooperation was very poor. And in 2019, in June, I was invited together with other international experts to participate in an international cross-border conference organized by the European Commission to start the process of discussion how the future cross-border function area should look like. And of course, also for me, it was something very innovative, and I gathered some information, some previous research, and Andrzej the same, and other colleagues, and we prepared the presentation about the future directions of development of cross-border cooperation in the Polish-Lithuanian borderland based on this functional area. And Commission invited us to provide the place-based approach and participatory approach in the process of designing of cross-border functional area. And in this slide, you can see some photos from workshops organized by me together with other experts, when we work together with these local actors, people on the ground, and they analyzed their tourism potentials, tourism resources, similarities and complementarities in their tourism offers to provide some, let's say, preliminary circumstances to develop cross-border functional areas. And as you can see, we are very active, but those actors were also very active, and the representatives of the European Commission, they participated in these workshops, and they were very glad of these results. And then Commission asked me to promote this project also in social media. So I visited the Joint Technical Secretary of the Interreg program in Vilnius. I discussed with experts responsible for assessment of cross-border project applications, yes, to convince them to assign additional funds for cross-border functional area, which was, in the process of designing in the borderland, to give them additional funds to develop this area. So you can see in the slide some media relations from my activities. And then Commission formally assigned me as a supervisor of the project on identification of the factors and processes for development of the tourism cross-border functional area in that borderland. And as I said, their expectation was only to prepare a roadmap of actions, following stages, how to develop such area, how to delineate the boundaries of such area, how to develop such area, how to prepare the mechanism of governance of such area. As I mentioned, it was like a pilot project for the Commission. It was like an experiment, and then nobody knew what will be the result of this project. And well, I had to design the entire study. My approach was to use various research methods and, of course, involve all important target groups of stakeholders in the process of research, in the process of delineating of the boundaries of the functional areas. So I invited not only representatives of local governments, public institutions, but also entrepreneurs, SMEs, businesses, and non-governmental organizations. And believe me, for many of them, it was very strange that they were invited for meetings of beneficiaries of Interreg programs while they were not eligible in this program. So it took me a lot of time to explain them that they are still crucial actors in this process. Regardless, they are not eligible to receive funds directly from Interreg, but on the other hand, they are eligible to receive additional European Union funds from other programs to develop their commercial investment in cross-border tourism offers. Yes, and I achieved these goals. I convinced them to participate actively in this process. And what was crucial? The crucial issue was to provide the participation of inhabitants, on local stakeholders from very beginning of the process to the final stage of the process. So place-based approach and participatory approach, they are two key conditions to provide the success of the process of development of cross-border functional area. And in this slide, you can see the workflow, yes, the project stages, and see what is important. So when I collected all data to measure cross-border flows, cross-border relations, to measure their needs, and I mean the stakeholders' needs and expectations, then I had to evaluate a tourism potential to provide some, as I said, complementarities and similarities of tourism offers, to design some potential joint cross-border tourism offers, because this is, like, in my opinion, like a crucial mass, like a crucial but also critical mass to develop such specific touristic cross-border functional area. And when I analyzed these potentials, both sides of the border, and when I analyzed the stakeholders' needs, and when I also identified additional factor impacting tourism development in that area, for example, this very, very serious security situation in terms of security, because it started earlier, not only when Russia attacked Ukraine, also before this, there were some concerns about the situation. When I analyzed together with my team all these factors, circumstances, important conditions of development of cooperation, we designed the boundaries of cross-border functional area. And as I said, there were many disputes between those actors who potentially wanted to join the area. But for example, the distance from their headquarters to the border was 2 hours, not only 1 hour driving, as we established such criteria. So at the end of the day, we delineated the boundaries of cross-border functional area, and then we started the process of creation a mechanism of governance, a mechanism of coordination of cross-border cooperation, but only with those actors who were invited to contribute to cross-border functional area. And when we established this mechanism, which I will present you in a moment, we started discussion on joint activities to boost cross-border cooperation in terms of tourism, but also to develop, let's say, mutual cross-border projects, not only public, but also commercial cross-border projects. And it was critical stage, in my opinion, because then I checked whether I efficiently convinced this representatives of SMEs and businesses to join the process of development of the area, but it was successful. And I received also some suggestions of commercial cross-border projects to develop cross-border offers. I will show you it later. And of course, when I prepared together with stakeholders, joint activities, joint cross-border projects, I prepared the map to create tourism destination in the borderland, and it was mentioned in Andrzej research that it is feasible not only to create functional area, but also to co-create together in cross-border cooperation a future tourism destination and future tourism brand of the borderland. And of course, when we prepared the roadmap, when we prepared the entire plan, we started cross-border public consultations to let people analyze what we prepare, to let people speak what they expect, to let people assess what we suggest to them. Because remember, at the end of the day, this is a solution for those people, not for experts, not for DG Regio, not for the European Commission, for people who live there and who should benefit of development of cross-border functional area. So it is a presentation of the workflow. And of course, maybe few words about cross-border area, about Polish-Lithuanian cross-border area. The length of the border, this is only 100 kilometers. But look when it's located. As I mentioned, this is the area between Kaliningrad and Belarus. So this is the so-called Suwałki belt, very strategic area for the entire European Union and the NATO, of course. And this is peripheral area. There is one of the most sparsely populated areas in the European Union, with high rate of unemployment, with many, socioeconomic problems, with strong needs of revitalization. But we did our best to distinguish natural heritage, unique natural heritage of these areas, which are mainly, as also Tatiana mentioned, some forests, protection areas, lakes, but also rivers, and beautiful landscapes. This is perfect place for slow tourism. And in terms of cultural heritage, we also distinguish some tourism attractions on both sides of the border, like monuments, also traditional cuisine, customs, traditions, also common memory based on the history, regardless some political and historical tensions between Poles and Lithuanian in the previous centuries, but also something very unique. This is a heritage of early medieval hill forts or tribes. They are Jadwingian tribes, similar to Vikings and Prussians, and they occupied the area in the early Middle Ages, and still some monuments and some historical heritage, some molds of them still exist there. So this is very unique for the area. And here in the slide, you can see some options which we considered to design the area in bigger scale, in augmented scale, in optimal scale. And finally, eventually, we designed the boundaries of the area. Consists of 9 Polish self-governments and 3 Lithuanian local government units. There are differences in administrative systems in both countries. Therefore, we have sub-regions, and Lithuania has local government units, okay? And the assessment criteria for designing touristic cross-border functional area, there were first problems, needs, potentials, and objectives of development of tourism in the borderland. So we invited people who really wanted to develop tourism, who were strongly motivated to develop cross-border tourism offers. and also people who declared that they would like to develop cross-border project. It was the second criteria. And third criteria, it was this NUTS-free criteria, territorial cohesion and administrative boundaries of local government units, because we included the entire local government units, not like a half of a commune or half of powiat, yes, or half of a sub-region. We included the entire administrative government units. And also we counted the relations between Poles and Lithuanians in different parts of the border, functional linkages between the communes located in the border. And in this way, we delineated the boundaries of the area. And then we started the creation of the mechanism of coordination of cross-border cooperation, which is visible in this slide. But frankly, I would like to skip this slide because it turned out that at the beginning of this year, they established European Group of Territorial Cooperation. So they moved on the higher level of cross-border cooperation. They canceled this mechanism of cooperation because they decided to establish more serious solution, which is a European Group of Territorial Cooperation, more serious and more stable solution. But when we finished this project in 2021, we designed for them such a mechanism of collaboration, including the board, representatives of both sides of the border in the presidium, secretariats, and also working groups and task forces focused on some aspects of cross-border tourism offers. And they, when we finished our job for the European Commission, can you believe that they signed the agreement on creation of touristic cross-border functional area called Jotfingia, the land of the Jatvingian tribe? As I mentioned, this is very unique tribe occupied this area in the early middle in the 11th or 12th century, as far as I remember. And it was like an additional value for the European Commission that we closed the process, that we achieved the result, tangible result, this agreement, not only roadmap, but also we implemented the roadmap, and they signed the agreement and they established this area. And of course, it was also important to analyze the potential sources of funding, not only Interreg, but also other potential sources, financial resources, national funds, international funds, also commercial funds for development of the area. Because, you know, without money, there is no progress in cross-border cooperation. And considering the analysis of tourism potential, we identified four key, I would say, four leading tourism cross-border concepts, which are visible in the slides. First, and I would say main concept, is mysterious land of the Jatvingian tribe. There is historical and natural heritage, historical, natural, and of course cultural heritage related to the Jatvingian tribes in that area. Then another tourism concept is green retreat. This is like a slow tourism concept. Then is common heritage and the magical borderland, because there are many fairy tales, legends related to the area. This is very magic area, I would say. Therefore, we decided to create a separate tourism concept for this. And here you can see some photos which can communicate the nature of each tourism concept. Green retreat, magical borderland, common heritage, and mysterious land of the Jatvingian tribe. Yes, so we identified this specific tourism potentials as a critical mass for develop future cross-border tourism offers. And as I mentioned, we pointed out mysterious land of the Jatvingian tribe as a main concept for the area, and we also pointed out the three supporting concepts. And we strongly emphasized that the concept of land of Jadwings is very similar to Vikings culture, Vikings heritage, which probably some of you knows. There were tribes occupied the north of the Europe in the past, in the medieval ages, and Viking heritage was inspiration for us to create the brand of Jadwiga for that area. And we also, together with local stakeholders, we also identified some joint actions to boost cross-border cooperation in terms of tourism in that area. Look, there are 3 topics of cross-border activities, network activities, I would say: development of the cross-border tourism information system, improving qualification to manage cross-border functional area tourism offer, and improving quality and diversifying the cross-border functional area agri-tourism offer, because it is very distinguished offer. Agri-tourism is very common in that area, so we wanted to emphasize this. And we also agreed with the both public, commercial, and social partners of cross-border cooperation. We also agreed some bilateral projects, for example, projects related to the mysterious land of the Jadwingian tribe. It is development of the tourism offer related to the remains of Jadwingian strongholds, some other investments in the other commune, Oszkinie, to revitalize the Jadwingian Prussian settlement then, and also some reconstruction of typical Jadwingian settlement in an additional commune on the Polish border and on the Polish side of the border. And the same, we also designed some future cross-border projects for other tourism concepts. And of course, not only designed, we also cooperate with people who wanted to develop this project using Interreg funds, but also other public and commercial funds. And what can we learn from the process? Well, first of all, on my experience, I can confirm that creation cross-border functional area is a multi-stage process. And in this slide, you can see a clear map of the stages which should be done to develop such an area, including some short-term activities for the area and the long-term activities for the area to develop at the end of the day the tourism destination and tourism brand for the area. And to provide the success of creation of such area, I would point out 4 factors. First, you have to check whether you can provide a sufficient tourism potential on both sides of the border. As I said, you should check whether you can provide a critical mass to develop future attractive and coherent cross-border tourism offers. For example, I mean some tourism offers related to Jadwingian heritage on the Polish side and some offers related to Jadwingian heritage on the Lithuanian side, yes? Like a joint cross-border tourism offers. And the same, for example, tourism offers related to the slow tourism, agriculture tourism. There should be coherent and complementary offers on both sides of the border. And another important issue is willingness toward development of cross-border cooperation on the other side of the border. That means that you have checked whether partners on both sides of the borders are really eager and well motivated to develop cooperation. And the 3rd condition is that you have to provide the participation of all important target groups of stakeholders in the entire process. That means that everyone who would like to be involved in cross-border cooperation should be aware of the specificity of the process, of the stages in the process, their rules in the process, their obligations, and the potential benefits of the process for them. And of course, you have to provide appropriate criteria of assessment the area to design cross-border functional area. And as I presented you in the second part of the lecture, together with Andrzej and other colleagues, we based on 4 criteria: cross-border location, identification of cross-border relations and potentials, sufficient level of cross-border cooperation, both institutional but also cross-border integration, and of course the providing the mechanism of development of cross-border governance in over the area. And more information about this case study you can find in the report which I prepared for the European Commission, and it's available online on the website of the European Commission. And I also put here some references. And thank you very much for your attention.